Being so close to the wild dogs of Mana Pools had been a wonderful experience, but for the second part of our safari we were moving on to something quite different. After taking off from the Hwange airstrip, it wasn't long before we were flying over Lake Kariba. This huge sheet of water is more than 140 miles long. No wonder it took 5 years to fill. Hwange National Park, which is in the west of Zimbabwe, was created in 1928 by Ted Davison, who was a Mancunian who worked for the then Rhodesia Railways. Ted Davison, though, was no ordinary engineer. He had vision. What he wanted to create was a whole series of waterholes for the animals to use, filled from boreholes driven deep into the Kalahari sand. This waterhole and the former plunge pool you can see at the front of the decking provide the centrepiece at Somalisa camp, and during the time we were there was a constant flow of wildlife coming to and fro to quench their thirst. In this position you really are just a few feet away from the elephants, looking eye to eye, which is both a wonderful thing and slightly scary at the same time. There are many other waterholes in the neighbourhood though, like this one which is not far from the airstrip. This one, a little further on, is complete with its diesel pump, which you can hear chugging away in the background. The sound of Hwange. There's nothing like an African sunset, but this was to be the last one we would see for a few days because of extensive cloud cover. Next morning the air is cool and fresh, and the dust has settled at least for a while. Even so, the elephants are still there having an early morning drink. As we set off on the morning drive though, it's not elephants that we see first, but an ostrich family. On our many trips to Africa, we've been very lucky to have coffee in some very beautiful locations. But this was a first. Just getting out of the truck for once, standing on the ground, watching the breeding herds coming to and fro, was a very different experience. Arriving back at camp at the end of the morning, there's another spectacular group waiting to welcome us. Not far from camp in the afternoon, we found this large male secretary bird, who was busily building his nest and calling to his partner at the same time. She was still on the ground, but she was also collecting material. With the combined weight of these two birds, the nest did look a little precarious at times. But once the harassing had stopped, they settled down into this strange kind of necking manoeuvre. Although Hwange doesn't have the huge herds of wildebeest and zebra that you'd find in Kenya, they are here in respectable numbers, though of course they don't migrate in the same way. We knew from the tracks that we'd seen previously that there were lions in the area, but it took us a little while to find them. But here there were 3 lionesses and 2 cubs. These were from a family group led by a coalition of 2 brothers, who unfortunately we never did find, only their tracks. After a couple of days it was time for us to move on to our final destination, Davisons Camp, in the Wilderness Safari's Linkwasher concession. As you can see from the video, the ground is very burned and scorched, having been subject to a very extensive fire 2 months previously, caused by somebody throwing a cigarette butt from a passing train. This delightful camp is centred round its own waterhole, not really quite close enough for photography in the dry season, but is nonetheless a real magnet for wildlife watching. Having not seen that many big cats, it was lovely on our first afternoon to come across these 2 male cheetahs sitting on a termite mound. They weren't hunting, they were actually making their way down to a waterhole for a drink, but it was great to stay with them for a while. One of the animals that we love but have seen very little of on this safari have been giraffe. But next morning, out early as the sun's rising, we came across our first group, a journey of giraffe. We all thought seeing that group of 9 giraffes was pretty special, but no sooner had the wildebeest moved on than we found another one, this time of 16 giraffes. Elephant were of course present everywhere, and didn't seem to be put off by the scorched ground at all. Indeed, they seemed to enjoy chomping on the burnt branches. This little chap, sheltering between his mother's legs, was the youngest elephant calf we'd seen on the whole trip. Our guide thought he was probably no more than just a few days old. Wilderness safaris have another camp in this location called Little Makalolo, and close to that is a very photogenic waterhole, where we went next. It was there where we found these lionesses and their cubs. They'd probably been a bit too adventurous. The arrival of the elephants and the trucks disturbed them, and decided it was time to return to Mum. Next morning we headed to the waterhole again and found the lionesses once more, though this time they looked rather more intent on what was going on around them. This one's watching a herd of wildebeest, but there was also a large herd of buffalo making their way down for a drink as well. In the event, the lions chose neither of them, but with so many buffalo massing, the obvious choice for us was to get down to the waterhole and wait for their arrival. While some buffalo were still arriving to drink, the majority had turned and were starting to leave. And that's just what we had to do, because our guide had been told on the radio that some distance away, the two cheetahs that we'd seen previously had made a kill, and we were off to find it. This had happened quite some distance away from where we'd seen them previously, right up in the northeast corner, right by the railway line that runs to Victoria Falls. But when we got there, the two cheetah were lying under what shade they could find in this very exposed position, keeping an eye on their kill, which it turned out was a small roan antelope. That afternoon we returned to see what the situation was. The cheetah had long gone, having abandoned their kill, and left it for the vultures to finish. So for the last time we set off south, down to the Makalolo waterhole once more, and sure enough the elephants weren't letting us down. Given the scale of the park, we've clearly only scratched the surface of what Hwange had to offer. But it's clear that Davison's vision has established this place as one of the best in Africa to see these wonderful creatures,